Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Ann Scott, and I'll be your host today. I'm the director of the Institute for Common Power and a historian and former professor of African American and United States history. We at the Institute for Common Power are dedicated to illuminating undervalued, underappreciated, and pivotal aspects of our collective history. This is all of our history. And we do this with the goal of taking education to action. We appreciate you joining us on this episode of the Seahawks, Our Journey Forward. For the past 3 years, we have partnered with the Seahawks so that we can go together on the Institute for Common Power's Truth and Purpose Learning Experience. It is a week-long, life-changing experience. It is a journey through the South, and it is a journey through self and community. The name of this series, Our Journey Forward, refers to what we experienced on the learning tour. The goal of the series is to recount our experiences and takeaways on a more personal level through conversation and hope that you will walk away inspired. The title and theme of the episode is The Bridge. So we will begin to explore the idea of the bridge and as it is related to Selma, Alabama, one of the last places that we go while we are on this journey. But before we do that, let's meet our guests. So Ben, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. I am Ben Obomanu, a former Seattle Seahawks wide receiver. I got drafted and played with Seahawks from 2006 to 2012, so 7 seasons with the Seahawks. Currently, I am a real estate attorney here in Seattle. But more than anything else, my biggest and most proudest moment, I'm from Selma, Alabama, my hometown. So glad to be a part of today's podcast.
And we are so happy you're here to be able to talk about that with somebody who is from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen?
Karen Wilkins-Mickey. They call me K-Dub. I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and I've been here for 5 seasons. I love the work I get to do, and how I get to bring our teammates on journeys like this is one of the highlights, I think, of the 5 years since I've been here. So I'm happy to be here to talk about it.
Fabulous. And Deja?
I'm Deja Stallings, the Community Engagement and Legends Coordinator here at the Seahawks. I'm going into my 3rd season. I'm excited to be here and talk about our wonderful journey.
Wonderful. Thanks. So, Ben, we're going to start with you. You are from Selma, Alabama. You graduated valedictorian at Selma High School. You played football and basketball there. So what can you tell us about Selma that gives us a little bit of background for this episode?
Well, think about it. As you can see, everybody says the same thing, that when you mention Selma, my face lights up and I get the biggest smile. Mm-hmm. My wife says it, my kids say it. And that's kind of what Selma means to me, right? Growing up there, parents and grandparents all born and raised in Selma. One thing that was taught for me when I was a little kid is about the history of Selma. And so Selma is a place where it sits in central Alabama. It's known for as the Black Belt of the South, right? It's a small city, but it's also a small city surrounded by other smaller cities. And so Selma's always been those places where it's a beacon where people meet and have gathered, and all this history from, Confederate history from the Civil War, also civil rights history too. And so for me growing up there, it's a place where you were taught in church and school about knowing the history of Selma, from its military background, from why things, you see all these monuments and these buildings where it's still, remnants of like Jim Crow, segregation, white only, black only, entrances to different places and stores. You see antebellum houses. So it's just a backdrop where for me growing up, it was always the sense of living in a history museum where you can walk and actually see and going across the bridge and other places where you start thinking, why are these things important? And so my parents and grandparents always taught me and my siblings and relatives the importance of being from Selma, that when we got older and as we, matriculated through school and into college, to be proud that we're from there, but then also know the story and the history of Selma so you can set the stage for all your friends and family who always ask those questions about what does it mean to be from Selma. So Selma's a place of history, of pride, a small city, but a lot of things to be proud of as a Selma alum.
I hear the pride, and you're right, your face lit up as soon as we mentioned Selma before you even started to introduce yourself. Mm-hmm. So happy to have that perspective. And you said it's like living in a history museum. What an incredible space to grow up. And you mentioned the bridge. And so we're going to talk about the bridge. The name of the episode is The Bridge. There's a bridge that is in Selma. It's called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It's named after a Confederate soldier and a Klansman. And it is at the top of that bridge and then at the foot of the bridge that in March of 1965, there were clashes between nonviolent, peaceful protesters and Sheriff Jim Clark, who was the sheriff of Selma at the time, and his posse, as well as people whom he had deputized, who were coming off of that bridge. And when those marchers, led by John Lewis on March 7th, were going over the bridge, 2 by 2, 600 of them, to protest for voting rights, they were beaten. And that beating was televised. And they came back 3 times before they were able to actually walk the 54 miles to Montgomery, to the state capitol, where Dr. King would eventually, on March 25th, deliver a speech. And so what we don't know about Selma is that this small town on the banks of the Alabama River, because of the protests of what started with a small group of people, actually delivered to the nation the 1965 Voting Rights Act, a Voting Rights Act that we have today. It's because of what they did in Selma. And so Karen, and Selma is one of the places that when we go on this journey, that we go and we walk over the bridge. So we have now partnered 3 times and gone on 3 journeys. And you have orchestrated that. You have worked hard to make that happen here at the Seahawks. Why?
Why? Because like Ben talked about, I didn't have the truth. I didn't have that truth. And when you're leading this work, I believe that I can do it best if I immerse myself in an experience and I can bring other people along. And I think I can show a PowerPoint presentation. I think, and you understand, Dr. Terry, as a professor, you can teach something. And when you speak, we listen. But, which is the other reason why we came. But we don't all have Dr. Terry growing up. And in this work, I don't want to show you a PowerPoint presentation. If I can take you to it so you can experience it yourself, that's what I'm going to do. And so when I met you, Dr. Terry, about 4 years ago, I think, I was on a panel for activism, sports and activism.
Yes. It was in June of 2022 when we launched the Institute.
Yes. Yeah. And at that time, I was really impressed by everything that I saw. And being on that panel, I'm so fortunate that we were able to connect, to do that.
I appreciate that, but you have worked, I've watched you work over the last few years diligently to get people to make sure that people are going on this journey and to make sure that they have an experience through this. And also sometimes to encourage those who may have not necessarily thought that this is something that they'd be interested in doing to do. And then when they come back, you ensure that they use this education to action. And they ensure it too. I mean, you watch the transformation of people. So, definitely. Deja, you went on this journey. And so when Karen first approached you about it, can you tell us kind of what your first thoughts were? And then can you tell us if that chimed with what your experience ended up being?
First answer was immediately no. A hard no. And I've never told Karen no, ever. I have such high respect for her, so much love for her. That was the first time I ever told her no, and I meant it. Just because growing up in the South, we just had a different idea of what it means to be Black in the South. And we knew the history, or we thought we knew, right? We thought we knew everything there was. There were certain places you didn't go as a Black person, and then as a Black woman, right? There's just certain spaces that you don't go because it's not safe. Certain people you just don't interact with, a certain way you speak to people. There's just a certain way you navigate the world as a Black woman in the South. And I did not want to go back or even further deep South than what was comfortable for me. It was an extreme discomfort, fear. It was just a lot of emotions. I'm even feeling them now. Just thinking about, going to the deep South. It was never on my agenda ever. And I love to travel. I never planned to go to that part of the country. But the lovely K-Dubs, as we know, is very convincing. All she said to me was just trust me. And I did, and I'm so glad I did. I literally wouldn't change that experience for the world. I learned so much there that they do not teach in the history books, that they just omit from history in totality. And honestly, the history, even though it's not good, but it's beautiful and it's rich. And the resilience that Black people have shown, that our people have shown, I can say that, that our people have shown just through everything, through all the adversity, through all the challenges, through all the pushback. That's the beautiful part of the story that everybody should know and respect. And I think just starting with that awareness, it just starts with going, right? Like you can't just avoid it. I was planning to avoid it the rest of my life, right? But you can't ignore the history. Has made us who we are. It's why we are here today. It's honestly the foundation for a lot of things in America. So like, how can we ignore it? So I'm extremely grateful that you said to trust you, and I will forever trust you. But definitely a once in a lifetime experience for sure.
I'm really glad that you encouraged her to go. And I appreciate your honesty in saying that you had trepidation about it, because I think a lot of people experience that. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for going. And you're bringing up these themes of resilience and perseverance and beauty. And Selma embodies all of that. I have the honor of going to Selma maybe 11 times a year now. And we have gotten to know the people very well. Ben, these are people who you grew up with. And so in this journey, we travel with one of them, Mr. Charles Molden, and when we get to Selma, we meet with a number of them, like Miss Joanne Bland. Miss Joanne Bland was 11 years old when she was on the bridge on March 7th, 1965. 11 years old, and by the time she was 11, she had already been arrested 13 times. So when you talk about resilience, that's resilience. When I think about challenges, I think, well, if she did that, we can do this. And so we're going to hear some of Miss Bland's words. And once we hear that, when we come back, Ben, I'd love to get your thoughts on her, knowing her, and on what she's saying.
Selma's a special place, and should be treated as a special place. I think it takes all of us, a piece of all of us, to get us where we need to get. Because your idea may be the best idea, but my idea could make it even better. You know the answers. You just don't know you know the answers. So you learn as much as you can from the past. What we did right, what we did wrong, and yes, we did a lot wrong. But we also did a lot right. You learn from that, pick out the best of it, and make it better. And you need to remember that. You're Selma. Okay? And every time I come to your town, pay me.
So much from that, from why history is important to the centrality of Selma to her humor. And so can you share with us a little bit about Miss Bland and what her words mean to you?
Miss Bland is one of our Selma icons, right? Being a football player from Selma, people talk about, like the celebrities and being who's from there and, who's who. But people like Joanne Bland and Minister Charles, we hear about later on as well. Those are the real icons. Those are real people that we looked up to as a little kid. Mrs. Bland, for instance, I remember time and time again where she's often asked to speak at schools. As you can see, her personality is always there. She has a unique way of telling stories to make sure that you don't just hear them in a nice, flowery way, but you hear the real, raw emotions that she actually went through, but also the emotions of that time as well, right? And so growing up, it was her being an icon, a legend. So when Mrs. Joanne speaks, you listen. You sit at her feet. You, as a little kid, you sit back and you listen to those stories. And more importantly for me, it's the age, right? Growing up in Selma, you are kind of introduced to the civil rights movement at a very young age, because that's when most of the the foot soldiers, some of them had kids that also came along, and Joanne was one of those people that her aunt and her grandmother brought her along to be a part of that civil rights movement. And so for me, it's always great to hear her tell those firsthand accounts, as Deja and Karen talked about. It's a lot different than watching a clip on TV or reading a book about it, but to hear her firsthand accounts about the fear that she had, the confidence that she ended up growing and like grooming from those moments of being arrested those many times, the way that she helps us tell the Selma story. Like, I'm here in Seattle, but I can always go back and count on, Mrs. Bland being there in those same spaces, telling the same stories, and being able to go beyond just walking across the bridge, go beyond just walking the steps of Brown Chapel and in the streets of Selma. She kind of takes you back and makes the experience more of a movement, right? To be able to capture your heart and your soul to say, hey, is that what it really was like? And I think that's the beauty of knowing her and seeing how she's just been able to be a beacon of light, a person that people often go back and look forward to seeing. You not only just see her there in the civil rights movement, the trail, but also in the stores and at church and other places. And so she is one of those really people that a lot of times when I get to come back and say, Ben, you're one of the famous people from Selma, I always turn the table and say, no, you need to beat Joanne Bland. Yeah. She'll give you like another edge, another side of Selma that goes beyond just the football and celebrity portion of things, but be able to take a step back and close your eyes and listen to her story, takes you back and actually gives you a true appreciation of the things that she went through and the things that, those foot soldiers and those people that marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge how those things actually transform the history of the world that we live in today.
Yeah, I've had the honor of knowing her for about 8 years and learning from her. We go so frequently. And so I can only imagine what it must have been like to grow up knowing her and learning from her. And I just want to stick on this for 1 second, because one of the things that she said is, you need to remember that you owe Selma. So what do you think she meant by that? What does that mean to you?
Yep. And I grew up being a Selma native. It's the appreciation of carrying the baton, right? Not letting the work of her and other foot soldiers be in vain. And so when you talk about owing Selma, that really is what she means, is the fact that we have those that right to vote. I remember growing up and just thinking about voting day. My grandparents would take voting day and get dressed up. Like, they would put their Sunday best clothes on, and because it was something that they knew that their fellow classmates, my grandparents, their classmates, their church members, their pastors were a part of that actual movement across a bridge, right? Marching across a bridge, and that whole fight for civil rights. So they would get dressed up for voting day. Same thing when, as a little kid, I saw the smiles on my parents' faces when they got a chance to get that sticker that says, "I voted." When many people take it and just take it for granted, they had a sense of pride of walking around. They would ask people at the stores, "You don't have your sticker on yet," meaning that you owe it to the foot soldiers to go in and actually exercise their right to vote. And so when Joanne Bland talks about, you owe Selma, not only do you owe Selma, just from, the appreciation, right, which some people do, come in and they visit and they leave. She's trying to convey that, no, you owe Selma by actually being active, by making a change in your own cities. It may not be voting rights today, but it's still whatever issues that you see that needs to move for equality, for justice, for treating people humanely, right? You owe it to Selma to do those things. You owe it to Selma to come back to Seattle and other places and carry on that legacy that Bloody Sunday and John Lewis and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., all those people did those things so that we can have these freedoms, have these opportunities to continue to carry the baton and pass the baton forward to the next generation. So I agree with Ms. Bland. We do owe Selma, and we're all trying hard to make sure we repay Selma back for all the things that it meant to all of us.
Beautifully stated. Small town with these incredible people with courage, giving us so much. We owe Selma. So we travel with another person, Mr. Charles Molden, and we have our last clip that we're going to hear too. Mr. Molden was also on the bridge. He was sixth in line on the bridge on March 7th, 1965, which would become, as you mentioned, Bloody Sunday. And he was beaten. And he was 17 years old. He was one of the student leaders in the city. And he would go on to be one of only 300 people who actually were permitted to march the entire 54 miles to Montgomery, when 25,000 people would end up in the streets in Montgomery after that march, a march that would lead to the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So let's listen to a clip from Mr. Molden, and then I'm going to come back and ask you, Karen, and you, Deja, about that, because you all were given a really special gift by Mr. Molden.
It is showing up, and as we see with Congressman John Lewis, and especially with Senator Booker, showing out. One of the things that hit me about his speech is that what he illustrated is what was illustrated in every movement that we succeeded at. Was the determination to last some time longer than those who opposed us were willing to give. Booker is the last expression of that determination, and I'd encourage you to follow in those footsteps. Make sure that no matter what they do, we go 1 hour or 1 mile or 1 inch farther to make sure that we don't let them win. Let's have a great day.
Thank you. Let's make sure we push. Let's have a great day. So the gift that I'm talking about, when we end our journey, we end it by walking over the bridge. We make sure we learn everything before we do that. It's on our very last day. And so when we walk over the bridge, Mr. Charles leads, and he decides through this journey who he would like to ask to walk over the bridge with him. And he selected you, Deja, and he selected you, Karen. And so if each of you in our last couple of minutes could tell us what that meant. And so we'll start with you, Deja, and then Karen, you will take us home.
Honestly, hearing his voice and just thinking about that whole experience is making me a bit emotional in the best way. It was the biggest honor ever. You know, I was pretty quiet along the journey as I was still working through some fears and, some things around that experience. And he saw something in me that I just didn't see, and it just meant the world knowing who he is and what he's done for us to choose me, right? Little old me. It honestly meant the world, and just going through that experience, walking across the bridge, trying to imagine what that time was like, and honestly putting it all into perspective. He's still alive, walking and talking. It wasn't that long ago, right? I think all of that was just like, that could have been any one of us. It really wasn't that long ago. They love to put the history books in black and white, but it was almost pretty much yesterday. So I think putting all of that into perspective and trying to think of on a positive note of, so much has changed since that time, but there's still so much more to do. So honestly, it was just the biggest honor.
Thank you, Deja. And Karen, he selected you and gave you an additional gift. Can you tell us more about that?
Mr. Charles Molden is truly my hero. I've had the opportunity to do three tours with him, three learning journeys with him, and each time we get closer. But I remember him asking me, well, throughout the trip, he would tell me how proud he was of me. And I was like, what are you talking about? You look at what you have done. Like, you're proud of me. And it took me the whole entire trip to realize, what he really was trying to say. And what he was trying to say is, like, you are the reason why I did this. Like, look at what you've become and look at what you're doing, and you're bringing people here to this history, and you're actually, creating change. And that's what we wanted. And you're doing the things that we sought out to do. But at the end of this last trip, he came up to me and he said, I just wanted you to know you're my hero. And I sobbed like a 2-year-old, actually, because I didn't expect that. But he's a legend in my mind. Miss Joanne Bland, Dr. Bernard, all of the foot soldiers, and just feel so grateful that I get to sit and share space with them. But to know that he felt that I was worthy to lock arms with him to walk across that bridge that very first trip, I knew that I did not want to let him down. From that point forward, it wasn't about me. It was about something bigger.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And it's an honor for us to be able to sit here and really uplift and honor Selma. And so thank all of you for being here. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences growing up there.